The night was unusually quiet in their suburban home in Portland. Rain whispered against the windows while Claire sat alone at the kitchen table, her hands clasped around a cup of cold tea. The clock ticked loudly in the silence, each second stretching her thoughts further into the past. Her father, Mark, had passed away 2 years earlier, but the silence tonight felt heavier than grief. It felt like a door was about to open, one she had avoided for years. Claire's life had always looked perfect from the outside. She was 32 now, a graphic designer with a small apartment and a life that seemed settled. But after her mother, Linda, had grown distant since her father's death, Claire felt something had been left unsaid, something big. It wasn't grief alone. It was guilt. She could hear it in her mother's tone, see it in her eyes whenever her father's name came up. It all started with one phone call. That morning, Claire had received a call from a man named Peter, someone she didn't recognize. He claimed to have known her father, said he had something her mother needed to tell her. His voice was calm but carried a weight that unsettled her. "Ask your mom about the summer of 1998, he said before hanging up. Claire had no idea what that meant, but she couldn't ignore it. Now, sitting in her mother's house, she waited for Linda to come home. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and old memories. When the front door opened, Linda stepped in, tired and graceful, her silver hair pulled back neatly. She smiled when she saw Claire, though the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "You didn't tell me you were coming," Linda said, setting her purse down. "I needed to talk to you," Claire replied. Her voice was calm, but inside, her heart was beating faster than the rain outside. "It's about Dad." Linda froze. Just a small hesitation, but enough. She sat down slowly, eyes fixed on her daughter. "What about your father?" Claire hesitated for a moment before saying it. "Someone called me today. He said I should ask you about the summer of 1998. The color drained from Linda's face. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. "Who called you?" she whispered. "He said his name was Peter," Claire replied. "Mom, who is he?" Linda looked away, her breathing uneven. "You shouldn't have answered that call," she murmured. But it was too late. The wall of silence she had built for decades had already started to crack. Claire leaned forward. "Mom, please. What happened that summer?" For a long time, Linda said nothing. Her eyes glistened with memories she had buried deep. "Your father and I were going through a hard time then," she began quietly. "He was traveling a lot, and I was lonely. I made mistakes, Claire. Ones I thought I'd never have to explain." Claire's breath caught in her throat. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the ache in her mother's voice said enough. Something painful had happened. Linda continued, her voice trembling. "Peter was a friend of your father's. He helped with some house repairs while your dad was away on business. He was kind, patient. I was angry at your father for being gone so much, and I let that anger lead me to something I've regretted ever since." The words came out soft but heavy. Claire's mind spun. "Are you saying you were involved with him?" Linda nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes. "It was a mistake that lasted only a few weeks. I told him it had to stop, that I still loved your father. He agreed. I thought that chapter was closed forever. But your father came home early one night. He saw Peter leaving." The room felt smaller now. Claire could hear her own breathing. Did Dad know? Linda closed her eyes. He knew, but he never spoke of it again. "He looked at me once, just once, with eyes I'll never forget, filled with hurt, but also mercy. He chose to stay, Claire. He forgave me, silently. We promised each other never to speak of it again." Claire felt her chest tighten. The image of her father, gentle, loving, selfless, made her eyes sting. All those years. "You lived with that." Linda nodded, her voice breaking. "Every single day. Your father's forgiveness was both a gift and a burden. I tried to make it right, to love him better, but that memory never left. I thought time would bury it, but guilt doesn't fade, it only waits." Claire leaned back, tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to protect her father's memory. Another part wanted to understand the woman sitting across from her, a woman who looked fragile, haunted. Then Linda whispered something that made her heart stop. "There's more, Claire." Claire looked up sharply. More. Linda's hands trembled as she reached for her daughter's hand. "After your father found out, something changed between us. He became quieter, distant for a while. I thought he'd never trust me again. But then, months later, I found out I was pregnant with you." The air went still. The rain outside seemed to pause, as if even the sky wanted to hear what came next. Claire frowned, trying to make sense of it. "Mom, what are you saying?" Linda took a deep breath. "I've never been completely sure. If your father was," she stopped, choking on the words. "If your father was truly your father." Claire felt the ground shift beneath her. Her chest tightened, and for a moment she couldn't speak. "You mean, you don't know?" "I tried to forget the timing, convince myself it didn't matter," Linda said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Your father loved you like his own from the moment you were born. But when Peter called you, I knew the past was coming back." Claire stood up, walking to the window. Her reflection stared back, her mother's eyes, her father's smile. Or was it? The storm outside grew louder, lightning flashing faintly in the distance. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she whispered. "Because it wouldn't have changed anything," Linda said, her voice breaking. "Your father didn't want you to know. He said love isn't about blood. It's about choice. And he chose you every single day." Claire turned slowly, her face pale but calm. "And what about Peter? Why is he calling now?" Linda wiped her tears, her voice trembling. "I don't know. Maybe he wants to tell you himself. Maybe he's dying. Or maybe he just wants forgiveness too." Claire stood there, her mind swirling with memories. Her father teaching her to ride a bike. His laughter, his patience, his warmth. Everything she had ever known about herself suddenly felt uncertain as the thunder rumbled softly outside. Linda whispered, "Claire, promise me you won't hate me for this. I never wanted to hurt you or your father." Claire looked at her mother, her heart torn between anger and compassion. "I don't hate you," she said quietly, "but I need to know the truth." Linda nodded slowly. "Then find him. Find Peter. He'll tell you what I couldn't." Claire turned toward the door, her decision made. The past had waited long enough. The storm followed her as she stepped outside, her heart racing with fear and determination. She didn't know what awaited her, only that the truth was somewhere out there, waiting to be uncovered. And as she drove away into the rain, she could still hear her mother's trembling voice echoing in her mind. "Some secrets don't stay buried forever, Claire. Sooner or later, they find their way back." The next morning, Claire woke up early, her mind still tangled in the storm of last night's conversation. She hadn't slept. The words her mother said kept circling through her head like an echo that refused to fade. Find him. Find Peter. By noon, she had done what she always did when she needed answers. She began searching. She looked up the number from the unknown call, traced it back through an online directory, and found a listing for a Peter Harris, just a few towns away. The name felt heavy on her tongue. She had heard her mother say it once, quietly, as though it carried pain and guilt all at once. It was raining again, thin sheets of gray falling over Portland. Claire drove through quiet streets, her fingers tightening around the steering wheel. Her chest felt tight. What if this man really was her biological father? What if he wasn't? Either answer would change her life forever. When she finally reached the address, she sat in the car for a long moment. It was a small house, neat and ordinary, surrounded by maple trees. A wind chime moved softly in the breeze, playing a tune that was strangely sad. Claire took a deep breath and stepped out. She rang the bell. After a moment, an older man opened the door. He looked to be in his late 60s, tall, gray-haired, with kind eyes that seemed to hold both warmth and sorrow. "Peter Harris?" she asked, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. He studied her face for a long time before nodding. "You must be Claire," he said quietly. "I wondered when you'd come." The sound of her name from his lips sent a strange shiver through her. "You called me," she said. "You told me to ask my mother about the summer of 1998. Why?" Peter stepped aside and motioned her in. The house smelled faintly of coffee and old wood. Because he said softly, "You deserve the truth." They sat at a small table near the window. Rain ran down the glass like tears. For a while, neither of them spoke. Peter's eyes moved across her face, not with judgment, but with something deeper. Recognition. "I didn't know how to reach out," he began. "For years, I stayed silent because your mother asked me to. She wanted to protect you and your father. Mark was a good man. He didn't deserve what happened." Claire swallowed hard. "Did you love her?" Peter nodded slowly. "But it wasn't the kind of love I was proud of. She was lonely, and I was there. It started with conversation to people trying to fill the emptiness in their lives. But it went too far. When she told me it had to end, I didn't fight her. I respected her for choosing her family." Claire looked down, her hands trembling. She said, "My father saw you that night." Peter's expression darkened. "He did. He came home early, and I'll never forget the look in his eyes. He didn't say a word. I left, and I thought that was the end of it. But a few months later, I got a letter from your mother. She said she was pregnant." Claire's breath caught. "And you thought—" "I thought you might be mine," Peter finished softly. But she made it clear she didn't want to test, didn't want to destroy what she still had. She loved Mark, and she wanted to raise you as his daughter. I respected that. I stayed away. I moved out of town. But I never stopped wondering." The words sank into the quiet room. Claire felt tears burning behind her eyes. "And now? Why come back now?" Peter looked at her with tired eyes. "Because I'm sick, Claire. I don't know how much time I have left. I didn't want to leave this world not knowing if you were part of me. If I had a daughter out there who never knew the truth." Her heart broke at his honesty. She could see it in his face, the weariness, the guilt, the years of silence. She didn't know whether to feel anger or compassion. After a long silence, Claire whispered, "You could have reached out sooner." "I know," Peter said softly, "but I thought it would only cause pain. Your father loved you. I saw pictures once through friends, and I knew he had given you the kind of life I never could. I didn't want to take that away." Claire stood and walked to the window, her reflection merging with the rain. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to feel," she said quietly. "My mother's secret has shattered everything I believed about my family. And now you're telling me you might be my father." Peter sighed. "You don't have to decide today. I didn't call you to demand anything. I just wanted to give you the truth I owed you. Whatever happens now, that's your choice." She turned back to face him. "Would you take a test? A DNA test?" He nodded without hesitation. "Of course. Whatever gives you peace." Claire left soon after, the rain following her all the way home. She didn't turn on the radio or call her mother. She just drove, thinking, feeling, replaying every memory she had of her childhood. The bedtime stories, the birthday surprises, her father teaching her to ride her bike. Those moments were real, no matter what biology said. But there was still a piece of her that needed to know. That night, she sat with her laptop and ordered 2 DNA test kits. She didn't tell her mother, not yet. She needed time. A week later, she visited Peter again to collect a sample. This time, he seemed weaker, paler, but his smile remained gentle. "No matter what the test says," he told her, "I'm glad you came. I never got to tell you how much I admired your father. He loved your mother and you more than anything. He was a better man than I was." Claire nodded, emotion tightening her throat. "He never told me about any of it." "That's because he chose love over pride," Peter said quietly. "Not many men could do that." When Claire left his house that day, she felt something shift inside her for the first time. She didn't just see Peter as the man who might have broken her family. She saw a man who had lived with regret for half his life. Days turned into weeks. The waiting felt endless. Every time she checked the mailbox, her heart raced. Then, one gray afternoon, the envelope finally arrived. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the paper. Her heart pounded so loudly that she could barely hear the rain outside. The words blurred for a moment before coming into focus: minus 99.7%. Probability of biological relation. Her world tilted. She wasn't Mark's daughter. The man who had raised her, loved her, protected her, wasn't her father by blood. She dropped the paper, her eyes filling with tears. That evening, she went to her mother's house. Linda opened the door, and the moment she saw the envelope in Claire's hand, her expression changed. She didn't need to ask, she knew. "Mom," Claire said softly, her voice shaking, "he's my father." Linda closed her eyes. Tears fell silently down her cheeks. I was praying that it wouldn't be true." Claire sat down across from her. "Why didn't you ever tell me? Why let me grow up believing something that wasn't real?" Linda reached for her daughter's hand, her voice breaking. "Because love was real. Claire, everything your father gave you was real. Blood doesn't define a family, love does. I thought keeping the truth hidden would protect you, but it didn't," Claire said quietly. "It just delayed the pain." Linda nodded, defeated. "You're right. I was a coward. I thought if I never spoke of it, it would disappear, but it never did." For a long time, they sat in silence, the only sound, the faint hum of rain. Then Claire whispered, "I met Peter. He's sick." Linda looked up sharply. "What?" "He said he doesn't have much time left. That's why he reached out. He wanted to tell me before it was too late." Linda's expression softened. "He always cared more than I wanted to admit. I told him to stay away, not because I hated him, but because I was afraid. I didn't want him to ruin the life we built." Claire sighed, her anger fading into sadness. "I think I need to see him again. One last time." Linda nodded. "Then go. Tell him what you need to tell him. But remember, your father Mark would want you to forgive. All of us." As Claire left her mother's house, the clouds above began to break. For the first time in weeks, sunlight touched the wet streets. She looked up at the sky and took a deep breath. Her heart was heavy, but something inside her began to heal. The truth had hurt, yes, but it had also set her free. She drove toward Peter's home again. The letter folded in her bag, her heart racing. She didn't know what she would say when she saw him. Maybe she would tell him she forgave him. Maybe she would thank him. Maybe both thought all she knew was that this chapter of her life, the one written in secrets and silence, was finally reaching its end.